Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Class with Prof. Eve. I'm Evelyn. I am so excited about this video in particular. This is where I get a chance to talk to you about my textbooks. So if you've read the description to my channel, then you already know that I am a sociology professor. I've been teaching sociology at the 2-year and 4-year college level for 18 years. My base and preference is 2-year college, which is where I am currently. And this kind of came about, this textbook writing and publishing, situation kind of came about unexpectedly. It was not planned. And it's really been one of the best things that's ever happened and one of the best things I've ever done in my career. So in this video, I'm going to go through the process of how this happened, and of course, talk to you about the books themselves and how you could use them, how you can purchase them. So let's get started. Okay, so how did this happen since it was not planned? Well, I was contacted via email by Cognella Academic Publishing, which is the publisher that I've worked with for both of the books that I've written and edited, and I'll talk about those differences in a minute. But I was contacted via email by Cognella, and at first I wasn't sure, if it was real. I didn't know if it was a scam. I'd heard of these kinds of scams happening before, and I hadn't heard of the publisher. Since it's not one of the main publishing brands in textbook publishing. I hadn't heard of them before, and so I wasn't sure if this was serious, and so I kind of ignored it. They contacted me a few times via email, and then finally I thought, well, let me look into this. Let me see what's going on. I've been teaching for a long time. Maybe I could, write a textbook. So I contacted them, and I'm so happy that I did, because it was really wonderful having talks with them and discussions about what exactly they were looking for and what my interests were. And so, yeah, that kind of took us on our way with the anthology that I'll talk about in just a moment. But I also want to say I was really impressed by the origin story of Cognella Academic Publishing. The founder, Bassam Hamada, was a 2-year college student for a while, who started his own publishing company, and now it's thriving. It's been in the textbook industry for 30 years now, and so I thought that was a really cool story. I've also had dreams of working directly in publishing, and so I really wanted to support this particular project, because of that. But I was also provided with a full team that included a content editor, graphic, designer, copyright and print, folks, and most importantly, the autonomy to write what I wanted and how I wanted it. And that meant everything to me, because I knew that whatever I would write would probably be a little bit different than some of the other introduction to sociology textbooks. And that's exactly why I wanted to do this, because I wanted to offer something a little bit different from my own perspective and experiences, which are unique, I would say, in the textbook publishing world. As a Black African woman, a Muslim woman, there's not many textbook authors out there like us, unfortunately. And so I really wanted the freedom to write how I wanted. And they've given me that autonomy, which has been incredible. So it's really been great working with Cognella. All right. So let's talk about the books, shall we? So we'll start with the anthology, or the reader. This was the first project that I worked on with Cognella as an editor. And so that means that I put the content of the book together, I organized it, I wrote the introductory pages, I wrote intro summaries for each of the essays that are included. And there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 16 essays in the book. There's 8 units, and 2 essays in each unit, so that would be 16 essays. And they, kind of go along with the typical introduction to sociology framework. Introduction to sociology is a class that we call kind of a survey class in sociology, which means that we cover a lot of different topics. And so I definitely wanted to hold that standard, even though, again, the style and orientation of my writing is different from a lot of other books like this. And so we have 8 units in the reader. A sociological perspective is the first one, and then we have culture, socialization, social structure, deviance, social inequalities, social institutions, and social change. Okay, and so I'll read the overview of the book on the back here. A Sociology Reader, Foundational Concepts for the Introductory Student features a collection of essays that provide real-world illustrations of foundational sociological concepts and theories. The essay selections vary in length and style, ranging from analysis to calls to action, argumentative to playful. The anthology is designed to help students sharpen their critical analysis of the social world, while also providing them with new perspectives to consider. The anthology is organized into 8 units. And it kind of goes through the unit description, which I'll skip over because I've already told you about that. A Sociology Reader is designed to supplement the corresponding textbook, A Sociological Worldview, Essentials of Sociology, which is my other book. However, it can also serve as a companion to any other textbook used within an Introduction to Sociology course, or be used independently. And that is something that I'll talk about toward the end of this video, the ways that you could use this book on its own, and how you could use it in combination with the Essentials book. So the last thing I'll say about the anthology is that, since most of it includes essays from authors that are not myself, I did choose these essays. I was very selective in the authors that I wanted to include. I wanted to make sure, of course, there was a good range of people by race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, place in the world, as far as the region that they live in, and also making sure that I had some of the foundational or essential essays included. And so The Promise by C. Wright Mills is one of those classical sociology essays. And that is in the first unit of the book. We have Extreme Isolation by Alfred Kinsey, which is another classical text in sociology and psychology. Another example would be The Body Ritual Among the Nasarima by Horace Minor, which is another classical essay in sociology and anthropology. So I did want to make sure I included some of those like older foundational essays, as well as a bunch of new ones, that range from topics on aging to mass incarceration to bias in media reporting of missing persons. So there really is a nice selection of different types of essays that students can use to begin to apply, the sociological concepts that they're learning, and to have a real world example, which I think is always really helpful. Okay. So the next book, and the last book that I've published with Cognella, is A Sociological Worldview, Essentials of Sociology. And this is the book that I wrote in its entirety. So excited about this book. Of course, I've already, thought about edits and, ways that I want to enhance each chapter of the book for the second edition. But it's a good, solid book. It really is. And so in this book, you have 12 chapters. And again, they are very similar to the topics that you would get in any other Introduction to Sociology textbook. Is the same, sort of trajectory as far as the introductory material, which is covered by the Sociological Worldview, which is chapter 1, culture, socialization, social structure, those foundational pieces of the discipline. And then it gets into, what we would call the social inequality section, where we talk about social stratification, gender, and race ethnicity. And then the last few chapters of the book are on social institutions, families, politics, economy, healthcare. And then chapter 12 concludes the book with a discussion of social change, looking at population dynamics, climate change, land, and those sorts of things. Okay? So I'll read the overview on the back of this book as well. A Sociological Worldview, Essentials of Sociology, introduces students to the complex layers of human society through the lens of sociology. The book explores the multifaceted aspects of social life from a sociological perspective, beginning with an understanding of societal structures and patterns of behavior, and extending to the examination of how individual experiences are shaped by cultural context and social forces. The text is structured around sociological concepts, including cultural norms, socialization, social stratification, and institutions such as family, education, healthcare, and economy. It examines the development of sociological thought and its application in analyzing various levels of society from an individual interaction standpoint to global systems. Topics such as gender, race, ethnicity, as well as contemporary concerns like climate change and population dynamics are also addressed through the interplay of theoretical perspectives and empirical research. A sociological worldview is ideal for courses in sociology that emphasize a global outlook on social dynamics. Students enrolled in introductory courses will gain foundational knowledge, while those in more specific fields, such as social theory or cultural studies, can deepen their understanding of society's complexities. Okay, so that is the Essentials book. Woo! One thing I really love about this book is just, the framing of the book, which was the thing that I spent the most time, kind of working through. And many other, if not most other, introduction to sociology textbooks, there's a separate section on like the global world or global stratification, it's sometimes called. And so it'd be kind of a chapter, of the book. And I really wanted that to be the entire framework of my book, because I think it's important, especially for folks living in the United States, to think of ourselves as interdependent, in the world, not an isolated entity, but a country that's connected to all other, countries around the world, and how what's happening in other places, what's happening here, the decisions that are made politically, economically, socially, are shaping and influencing those same things around the world in very significant ways because of the stature of the US and the global landscape. So that was like really, really important for me. And in the first chapter, which is the longest chapter of the textbook, I think that one's nearly 30 pages, and the rest of the chapters are about 15 pages average. I spent some time going through the origins of sociology, not just in the US and Europe, like most other intro books cover exclusively, but also looking at how sociology developed in Asia, how it developed in Latin America, how it developed in Africa. And I think that really sets readers up to really take in this global outlook and to be thinking about the various positionalities, right, of individuals and structures across the world. So that is, I think, one of my favorite pieces and one of the very unique aspects of this particular book. So do you need both books? Can you use just one of the books? You absolutely can. It is very possible to use one or both of the books. I have used the books individually. I've used the books collectively. I've used them in 4-week classes, 6-week classes, 13-week classes, and 16-week classes. Okay, I've used these books online. I've used these books in person on campus. So I've had the experience of trying these books out across different formats. I've also sought student feedback on these books, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So with the anthology or the reader, I think that is a book that is really nicely set up for short-term courses. So in the summer, I often teach a 4-week introduction to sociology course. And so of course that is a very truncated course, since we only have 4 weeks, and there's a lot of things that I want to make sure to include in that time that we have. So it's a lot easier and makes a lot more sense to use only the reader. I'm also an instructor that likes to get through the books that I assign. I like to get through the entire book. If I'm going to have students purchase the book, it's important to me that we cover the entire book. So that's another reason that I only use one book in my shorter term classes. So with the reader, as I've discussed and as the overview states, it really partners well with supplementary material, especially if you're using it for a class outside of sociology. But even sociologists, can integrate other material that is your, preference, and it works really well with that as a supplementary book. But it can also be taught on its own. I teach it on its own, especially for those 4-week classes. I think I've done it for a 6-week summer class as well, and it works out nicely. And so you would have to assign, multiple essays per week, 2 or 3 essays per week, for a class format in that way. But since you have such a variety of different topics to choose from, you could, pick and choose, which ones that you want to focus on. For the Essentials book, another book that you could use on its own, and really that one is even better suited to be used on its own because it is a full Introduction to Sociology textbook and comprehensive in that way. So it has all the topics covered in sociology and really emphasizes the working through context and so, I think my camera might have gone out. Hopefully that didn't happen for you all. If it did, hopefully we're back. So using just the Essentials book on its own is great. In the summer, it's perfect for a 6-week class, works really nicely for an 8-week class. You could assign 4, chapters at a time at most, or you could break that down to 2 or 3. It just kind of depends on how your class is formatted. But like I said, this is a comprehensive book that covers all of the materials needed in a Sociology 101 class, and so it's really easy to use it on its own. I use both of these books in my 16-week classes. Even when I teach 13-week classes, I use both of these books. And what I'll do is I'll choose one essay from the anthology, and I'll choose a chapter or more from the Essentials book and assign those per week in my classes. And so that works out really nicely. And so you have like the theory, the breakdown of the concepts, and then the reader provides the applied examples. And I think that's really a nice combination. Of course, you could provide the applied examples and have activities in class. I do all of those things as well. But it's really nice to read these essays, that are talking about all these different subjects based on real world activity, right? And real world examples. And so these books partner really, really well together if you choose to use them in that way. Okay, so let's talk about how to purchase the books if you are interested. I'm very excited to start my direct marketing campaign in the upcoming months, where I'm going to be visiting in person colleges and high schools in my area. I'll also be contacting a bunch of folks online as well. And so that's really exciting. But you can purchase these books through the Cognella Academic Publishing website, and I will put the links in the description box. But I would encourage you to publish them directly, or to purchase them directly from the publisher. There is a deal for both of the books. If you get them in a bundle, there is a deal on the publisher website. You can also find the Essentials book on Barnes & Noble's website, and you can find both books on Amazon as well. And like I said, I'll put those links in the description. And before I move to conclude this book, I will talk about a couple of the challenges working with an independent publisher. I will say that I was contacted by other publishers as well, and even one of the major publishers, but I just wasn't provided the autonomy that I wanted, that I was able to achieve with Cognella. And actually, there was a lot of negotiation about royalty rates and things like that as I moved into my second book, and Cognella emerged as the best offer in that regard as well. So I'm really happy to be working with Cognella. But working with an independent publisher, you do have to think about the fact that they don't have as much money, right? As much of a funding stream as some of the bigger publishers like McGraw-Hill or Pearson or Cengage. And so because of that, you will be doing, some of the marketing on your own. You're encouraged to do some level of marketing, even though they do help with that as well. There's also considerations like color in the textbook and images. There's not a lot of color in my books, and there were some images that we weren't able to obtain due to copyright. Cost was a factor for some of them. So those sorts of things, may come along with working with a smaller publisher. But like I said, it was well worth it. Those were not deal breakers for me, and we were able to produce two great products together. All right, well, this is the end of this particular video. I think that is all that I have to say about my textbooks. Let me grab them again. Here they are, my babies. They look very similar, gray and blue. But I hope that this video was helpful, informative, and if there are more questions or interest in working with me or using these books, you can contact me directly. I'd be happy to talk with you more about how you could use these books in different types of classes and different types of settings. Okay, so thank you all for sticking with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Please like and subscribe and share. Until then, peace.